September 19, 1942. Over Berlin. A German ace pushes his fighter to the red line engine, screaming fuel burning, yet the enemy bomber pulls away. No guns, no armor, just speed. In that moment, the Luftwaffe realizes this war has changed. The silence didn't make sense. At 27,000 feet above the gray sprawl of Berlin, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Johann leaned forward in his cockpit, eyes locked on the aircraft ahead. His Messerschmitt Bf 109G was at full power, throttle jammed forward, engine temperature climbing gauges trembling near the red. This was as fast as Germany's best fighter could go. And still the target was pulling away. It wasn't flying evasively. It wasn't diving. It wasn't running in panic. The British aircraft held a steady course, calm and effortless, as if the chase behind it didn't exist. No gun turrets, no defensive fire, just a smooth blue shape slicing through thin air with quiet confidence. Johann had survived the Battle of Britain. He knew interception math by instinct, but nothing in his experience explained what he was seeing. "This shouldn't be possible," he muttered into his oxygen mask. Yet there it was, an unarmed bomber built of wood, leaving Germany's finest fighter behind over the heart of the Reich. And in that moment, high above Berlin, the Luftwaffe's certainty began to crack. Wilhelm Johann was not supposed to lose this fight. At 27, he was already a veteran of the air war, scarred by combat, hardened by survival. He had flown since 1940 through the Battle of Britain, through burning skies and falling friends. 23 victories marked on his record. He trusted numbers, angles, and physics. Speed climb, rate-firing window air combat was a discipline, not a gamble, and his aircraft reflected that belief. The Bf 109G beneath him was the Luftwaffe's pride. More power than any variant before it. Nearly 1,500 horsepower screaming through the propeller. Built to climb fast, strike hard, and kill quickly. This was the machine meant to defend the Reich. Ahead of him flew something that looked wrong. The British aircraft was too clean, too smooth. No glint of gun barrels, no defensive turrets. Just a long, elegant fuselage painted in pale reconnaissance, blue twin engines, humming evenly, almost mockingly. It didn't weave and it didn't react. It simply flew as if Berlin itself posed no threat. Inside that cockpit sat Flight Lieutenant D.A. George Perry. He was younger than Johann. On just his fourth operational mission over Germany, no escort, no protection. His survival depended on a single idea: speed so overwhelming that no one could touch him. As Johann pushed deeper into emergency power fuel, draining at a terrifying rate, he realized the truth forming in his gut. This was not a chase that could be won. The gap wasn't closing, it was widening. For the first time in the war, Wilhelm Johann wasn't being outflown by skill or tactics. He was being outrun by a philosophy. And the wooden aircraft ahead of him was about to expose every assumption Germany had built its air war upon. Johann tried to force the numbers to change. He closed to 3 miles, then 2. The Mosquito grew larger in his gun sight, its wings perfectly level, its engines steady. At 1 mile, instinct took over. His thumb hovered near the trigger. One more second, and this would end the way every interception was supposed to end. Then the British pilot advanced the throttles, not gradually, not cautiously, instantly. The Mosquito surged forward as if released from a leash. Johann slammed his own throttle through the gate into emergency power. The DB605 engine howled in protest. Airspeed climbed past 400 miles per hour. Engine temperature spiked. Fuel burned away at a rate that made his stomach tighten. He was flying on borrowed minutes now, maybe seconds. Still, the distance increased. For 8 full minutes, he chased at maximum power, every gauge screaming danger. The thin air at 27,000 feet punished the BF-109G mercilessly. Its single-stage supercharger struggled. Power bled away with altitude. The fighter that dominated lower skies was gasping here, trapped by its own design limits. Ahead, the Mosquito looked unbothered. Its twin Merlin engines, built for this height, held their power effortlessly. No smoke, no strain, no urgency. What felt like desperation to Yonan looked like routine cruising to the aircraft he was chasing. At 09:03 hours, reality won. With fuel critically low and the engine brushing failure, Yonan broke off. He watched the British aircraft continue toward Berlin, untouched and unhurried, shrinking into the distance like a bad dream he couldn't wake from. That afternoon, his combat report was brutally simple. Interception attempted. Maximum power sustained. Unable to close. Enemy aircraft faster than our best fighter. It wasn't just a failed chase. It was the moment the Luftwaffe learned that speed, absolute speed, could make an enemy untouchable. The most dangerous part of this story came before the chase ever happened, because Germany had been warned. In early 1941, intelligence reports filtered quietly into Berlin from agents operating in neutral Sweden. The documents described a British aircraft still under development, something so strange it read like a joke. A bomber built largely from wood. Laminated birch plywood balsa core spruce framing. No defensive guns. No turrets. Just 2 crew members betting their lives on speed. Estimated top speed over 400 miles per hour. Inside the Reich Air Ministry, disbelief turned into dismissal. Engineers and analysts saw the numbers and laughed them off. One technical assessment filed in March 1941 concluded that the reports were either deliberate British deception or proof of industrial desperation. Britain, short on aluminum, was supposedly regressing to furniture-grade construction. To German planners, it made sense. They had pioneered modern bomber warfare with all-metal aircraft machines wrapped in armor bristling with guns. Survivability came from firepower. Anything else was weakness. A wooden bomber wasn't innovation. It was failure. The ridicule spread quickly through fighter units. Pilots mocked the idea of a wooden bomber. Some called it the Holzflugzeug. Others joked it was English furniture with wings. No one believed such an aircraft could survive over Germany, let alone outrun its interceptors. That assumption became doctrine. So when Wilhelm Yonan filed his report in September 1942, describing an unarmed wooden aircraft that Germany's best fighter could not catch, the problem wasn't just tactical, it was psychological. The Luftwaffe hadn't merely failed to stop the Mosquito. They had built their entire air war on the belief that something like it could not exist. Reality arrived faster than denial could keep up. After Yonan's report, more Mosquitoes followed, and each one confirmed the nightmare. Radar stations across northern Germany began detecting single aircraft moving at speeds that didn't fit any known profile. Controllers scrambled fighters anyway. They always did. And every time the result was the same. The British aircraft flew straight through German airspace in broad daylight. They didn't dodge, they didn't scatter, they didn't wait for nightfall. At altitude, they were ghosts too fast to catch, too high for flak to touch. Fighter pilots pushed their engines until temperatures spiked and fuel gauges dropped toward empty. The Mosquitoes simply kept going. By December 1942, the trickle became a routine humiliation. Number 105 Squadron flew regular photo reconnaissance missions over Berlin, Hamburg, and the Ruhr. Then came the bombers Mosquitoes, modified to carry payloads, striking with precision and leaving before alarms finished sounding. Each mission followed the same pattern: detection, scramble, failure. Not a single Mosquito was shot down by German fighters during these operations. Losses came only from navigation errors or mechanical failure, never from interception. The Luftwaffe, once feared across Europe, had become a spectator force, watching helplessly as British aircraft crossed the Reich at will. Inside German headquarters, disbelief turned to panic. Reports stacked up. Identical conclusions. Same impossible speed. Same inability to close. No tactical explanation fit. This wasn't a fluke. It wasn't luck. It was a system working exactly as designed. And with every successful mission, the Mosquito stripped away another layer of German confidence, proving that the assumptions mocked in 1941 were now tearing holes straight through the Reich's air defenses. The breaking point came in front of the entire German nation. January 30th, 1943. Berlin, 11 o'clock in the morning. Hermann Göring, Reichsmarschall of the Luftwaffe, stepped up to the microphone to commemorate the 10th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power. His speech was meant to project strength, absolute control of German skies, total air superiority over the Reich. Millions listened by radio. Berliners paused in their homes and offices as his voice echoed through the capital. Then at 11:03 a.m., the sky betrayed him. 3 Mosquitoes appeared high above Berlin at 25,000 feet. Not at night, not in secrecy, in perfect daylight. They flew in tight formation, silver blue shapes gliding calmly over the city center, cameras clicking, engines droning with confidence. Anti-aircraft batteries opened fire. Shells burst thousands of feet below the targets, useless, impotent. Fighter controllers scrambled everything available. 16 fighters clawed for altitude engines, straining pilots desperate. None got close. The Mosquitoes completed their run, turned west, and accelerated away, right in front of the capital, right as Göring spoke of Luftwaffe dominance. From the streets below, civilians watched German fighters fail in plain sight. Inside the broadcast studio, Göring's voice faltered. He lost his place. Rage leaked through the carefully rehearsed words. Everyone listening understood what had just happened. British aircraft had flown over Berlin during his speech, and Germany's air defenses had been powerless to stop them. In that moment, the Mosquito stopped being a military problem. It became a public humiliation. Humiliation demanded retaliation. Within days of the Berlin incident, Göring's fury tore through Luftwaffe headquarters. This was no longer about statistics or technical reports. This was personal. A wooden British aircraft had embarrassed the Reich in front of its own people, and that could not be allowed to stand. On February 4th, 1943, Göring issued a direct order: stop the Mosquito at any cost. 2 elite fighter units were formed for a single purpose: no escort duty, no bomber interception, no distractions. Their only mission was to hunt Britain's wooden intruder, Jagdgeschwader 25, and Jagdgeschwader 50 would be staffed with the Luftwaffe's best pilots, aces, with hundreds of victories between them, men who had survived years of constant combat. These units received priority access to Germany's latest equipment. Modified Bff-109 G6 fighters arrived with MW-50 methanol water injection systems capable of temporarily boosting engine power to levels that pushed the aircraft to its limits. For brief moments, the fighters could go faster just enough to believe interception might finally be possible. Training changed overnight. Pilots practiced tactics they had never needed before, predicting Mosquito routes, climbing to altitude long before radar contact, conserving fuel for a single fleeting firing opportunity. Everything depended on perfect timing. Miss the window, and the Mosquito would simply fly away. There was no room for error, no second pass, no dogfight. This wasn't air combat as the Luftwaffe understood it. It was a race against physics, and physics was already choosing sides. The first test came fast, and it crushed every remaining illusion. On February 19, 1943, German radar detected a single Mosquito approaching Berlin. Exactly the kind of target JG-25 had been created to destroy. Fighters scrambled early, climbing long before visual contact, positioning themselves at nearly 28,000 feet along the predicted route. This time, there would be no excuses. As the Mosquito appeared, Oberleutnant Herbert Ehlfeld led the interception personally. His fighters rolled into a steep dive from above, gravity adding speed the engines alone could never provide. Airspeed surged past 450 miles per hour. For a brief, intoxicating moment, it worked. Ehlfeld closed to within 800 meters. Then the dive flattened out. The borrowed speed vanished almost instantly. The Bf-109 G6S hit their sealing engines, straining acceleration gone. Ahead, the Mosquito did what it always did. It simply kept going. No evasive turn, no panic, just steady, relentless speed. Within 60 seconds, the gap reopened. Ehlfeld's report left no room for interpretation. At altitude, the Mosquito cruised around 410 miles per hour. Germany's fastest fighters could sustain barely 390. The difference, 20 miles per hour, wasn't dramatic. It was decisive. It meant no pursuit, no second chance. A firing window measured in seconds at extreme range against a target moving too fast for accuracy. Mission after mission followed. Tactics improved. Timing sharpened. Results never changed. By late 1943, JG-25 had claimed just 2 Mosquito kills, both against aircraft already crippled by mechanical failure. In return, the unit lost fighters and pilots to Allied escorts while chasing an enemy it could not reach. The specialized anti-Mosquito unit was bleeding itself dry, and slowly, quietly, the Luftwaffe accepted the truth. You cannot defeat what you cannot catch. Admitting failure was impossible, so Germany chased miracles instead. With JG-25 collapsing, Luftwaffe leadership turned to the engineers. If pilots couldn't catch the Mosquito, then a new machine would. Something faster, something higher, something not yet real. Kurt Tank at Focke-Wulf understood the problem immediately. German fighters had been built to fight bombers, heavy-armed, protected. The Mosquito wasn't a bomber in the old sense. It was a projectile with a cockpit. To stop it required a complete redesign, not an upgrade. And redesign took time Germany no longer had. Still, they tried. The answer on paper was the TA-1 52H, a high-altitude interceptor with long wings, a pressurized cockpit, and an engine tuned for thin air. On charts, it looked perfect. Nearly 470 miles per hour at extreme altitude. A mosquito killer at last. But paper didn't fly missions. Development dragged on. Factories were bombed, materials ran short, pilots waited. By the time the first T-152s reached operational units in early 1945, the war was already collapsing. Fewer than 150 were built. They encountered mosquitoes twice. They achieved nothing. Then there was the jet. The Me-2 6.2 promised salvation, 540 miles per hour faster than anything in the sky. Goering clung to it like a prophecy. But speed came with a cost. Engines that lasted only hours. Terrible fuel consumption. Vulnerability during takeoff and landing. And at extreme speed, the jet couldn't turn. When pilots finally met mosquitoes in combat, the results were humiliating in a new way. The jet overshot. The mosquito turned gently. The target vanished. Germany had built machines for the future, but the mosquito was already there. And the truth was unavoidable. The Luftwaffe wasn't losing because it lacked technology. It was losing because it had chosen the wrong ideas, too heavy, too complex, too late. The race was over, and Germany had never been in the lead. The final insult was how ordinary the mosquito really was. When German analysts finally stripped away the anger and examined the evidence, there was no secret weapon hiding in the design, no revolutionary engine, no exotic materials, no miracle technology stolen from the future, just choices. The Mosquito was built from wood not as a compromise, but as a calculation. Laminated birch and balsa weren't crude substitutes for metal. Bonded correctly, they were light, strong, and resilient. Lighter airframe meant less drag. Less drag meant more speed. Speed meant survival. Everything unnecessary was cut away. No gun turrets. No defensive gunners. No armor plate weighing the aircraft down. Each turret removed saved weight, crew fuel, and aerodynamic efficiency. Where German bombers carried protection, the Mosquito carried nothing but momentum. That saved weight went where it mattered. More fuel, stronger structure, higher cruising speed. At altitude, the Mosquito didn't sprint. It cruised faster than German fighters could chase. Even damage worked differently. Wood absorbed impacts that would tear aluminum apart. Several Mosquitoes limped home, riddled with holes, their frames shredded, but intact crews stepping out alive. One aircraft returned with over 200 flak strikes and still landed safely. Production followed the same ruthless logic. Furniture factories, boat builders, piano workshops. Britain spread Mosquito construction across industries that never competed with fighter production. No aluminum shortages, no drain on skilled labor. Nearly 8,000 aircraft rolled out without slowing Spitfires or heavy bombers. Germany studied captured examples in disbelief. The Mosquito wasn't superior because it was advanced. It was superior because it was perfectly optimized, a machine built for one mission, stripped of ego, immune to tradition, and devastating in its simplicity. And that made it impossible to counter. The damage went far beyond a single aircraft. Every Mosquito mission rewired Germany's air defense system in real time. Radar stations lit up early, tracking fast-moving blips that didn't fit bomber formations. Controllers scrambled fighters again and again, pulling them away from where they were actually needed. Pilots climbed hard-burned, fuel-stressed engines and watched their targets vanish. Those fighters never made it back in time to stop the real threat. Behind the Mosquitoes came the heavy bombers, Lancasters, Halifaxes, slower, heavier, deadly in numbers. With German interceptors drawn out of position, chasing untouchable raiders, the bomber streams slipped through thinner defenses. Anti-aircraft batteries wasted ammunition firing at targets they couldn't reach, shells bursting harmlessly thousands of feet below. At night, the situation became even worse. Mosquito night fighters prowled the darkness with radar-hunting German bombers as they formed up to attack Britain. The hunter had become the hunted. German crews never saw them coming, only tracers flashing past and engines erupting into fire. Then came the most devastating role of all, pathfinding. Mosquitoes flew ahead of Bomber Command, marking targets with colored flares, guiding destruction with surgical precision. German night fighters scrambled to intercept the fast leaders and found themselves hopelessly outmatched, arriving late and out of position while the main force followed unchallenged. The Mosquito wasn't just surviving the air war, it was shaping it. Every sortie forced Germany to react to waste-time fuel pilots and ammunition. It created chaos, distraction, and exhaustion across an air defense system already stretched to breaking. One fast wooden aircraft had turned speed into strategy, and Germany paid the price for every kilometer per hour it didn't have. By 1944, even the Reich's most powerful voices stopped pretending. Behind closed doors, the tone changed from anger to resignation. Reports no longer asked how to stop the Mosquito, only how to limit the damage. Senior commanders began writing what were in effect admissions of defeat. The aircraft itself was no longer the question. The philosophy was. German design had chased versatility fighters that could dogfight, intercept bombers, absorb punishment, and carry heavy weapons. Every requirement added weight. Every compromise slowed them down. The Mosquito had rejected all of it. One mission, one priority, one unforgiving standard: be fast enough that nothing can touch you. And it worked. Internal assessments acknowledged what pilots already knew. There was no interceptor in service or in development that could reliably catch a Mosquito at altitude. Not now, not soon, not with the resources remaining. The gap wasn't tactical, it was structural. Morale suffered accordingly. Fighter pilots no longer spoke of Mosquito interceptions with confidence. They spoke of them like weather, something that passed overhead, unstoppable, indifferent. Crews watched the blue shapes cross the sky and felt the same frustration every time: detection without consequence, effort without effect. The Luftwaffe had once dominated Europe through speed, surprise, and innovation. Now it was being undone by those same principles, used better by someone else. The wooden aircraft had forced Germany to confront a brutal truth. Superiority wasn't about tradition, firepower, or pride. It was about understanding what actually mattered in combat and committing to it without hesitation. By the time that lesson was fully understood, it was already too late to apply it. The Mosquito had won without fighting, and the Reich knew it. Years after the guns fell silent, the truth sounded clearer in memory than it ever had in war. Wilhelm Johann survived. He lived long enough to write about the morning over Berlin, the chase that ended before it ever truly began. In his post-war memoirs, he returned to that September day in 1942, not with anger, but with quiet clarity. He described the Mosquito as something unreal, a presence, not a target. You saw it, you reacted, you did everything training demanded, and still it slipped away. Not through trickery or luck, but through simple, overwhelming speed. We could match them briefly, he wrote, in dives or emergency power. But the moment the flight leveled out, they pulled away. Every time. What haunted him wasn't fear. It was helplessness. Jonen understood then what German command had struggled to accept. The fight had been decided before the first round was ever fired. The Mosquito didn't need to win battles. It only needed to refuse them. By denying interception, it denied combat itself. Other pilots echoed the same memory. The same phrase surfaced again and again in reunions and letters like chasing a ghost. No turning engagement, no second pass, just a shrinking shape disappearing into cloud and distance.